Hi, friends. It is week 12. If you can already believe it, we are into validations. What that means is we got this week and next week where we're learning new material. After that, we are ready. We have our belt prep week. We're going to go over everything one more time, kind of walk through this, and then your belt exam will open. So, again, we only have 2 more weeks of new material. This week, we're learning about validations. Next week, we will continue sort of on that, where we have login and registration. We're going to learn some new tools there. And then we are just prepping for the belt exam. So get it going, get it ready. We're going, we're flying. A little bit of expectations for this week. You've got a discussion question, as always. You're always going to have a discussion question due. And you've got one core assignment, this cookie orders with validation. And so I believe there's already a cookie orders. I believe it sort of builds on it. But all we're going to do is add in some validations just to make sure that, hey, we're putting in good data. There also is an email with validation one. So this is just a practice assignment that'd be good for you to have just to practice sort of emails. And there is something called pattern validation, which we're going to talk about here in a bit, that you can use with this email validation using what we call regex, which is a pattern validation. So that's what we have this week. Again, next week, we're going to be going into login and registration, kind of building off what we're doing today. So if we can recap just a little bit of what we did, we've got our project. This project is video games and users. Let me open up my shell. And then let me start everything up. Where we've got, if we come here, say local host 5,000. Great. So we can go to our dashboard. This has all of our games here. If we go back, we can go to create a user where we can create a user. Once that user is created, we can go straight to their account, or we can create a game. And then that information goes straight to our dashboard. Cool. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about form validation. Now, if you guys have ever filled out a form online, then you are super familiar with this. Really, what form validation is a way that we can assure that our data that we're receiving from our customer is up to the standard that we've decided. Data is the new oil. Data is king. Having data is worth billions and billions of dollars. That's why Facebook and Google are worth so much, is because of all the data that they collect and they can sell to advertisers or whoever. So we want to make sure that when we have data, not only do we want to, if we decide to monetize it, cool, we need to have it for that reason. But other than that, we need to make sure we have good, accurate data that doesn't kind of clog up our database, but we're making sure that our users are giving us accurate things, so that way our database is succinct, and that which in turn can cost us less amounts of money. By having a user create a million different profiles that, is missing stuff, it just kind of creates for a messy database. So we want to make sure that we validate what the user gives us. And so what we do is, first and foremost, if we look at this code, we have a couple different forms, right? We have my user form, and this is where we create my user, which we see that, easy peasy. And then we have my game form, which is where we create my game. So we're going to go off the game here. And we'll validate, and I'll show you kind of how we can do that. And then we can keep building off of this, and we can do this for user too. Same. Actually, we'll go off user. That makes sense. Okay. So what we're going to do with form validation is we're going to use what we call a static method. Now, on our class, if you remember, a static method doesn't have to do with a specific instance. It's just a capability of what our class can do. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build out a static method. So let me call this, come here. We're going to have this static method. If I could collapse this. Ooh, perfect. And then we're going to collapse this. Bring this side by side. Cool. We're going to go into, let me kind of get rid of some of this stuff. into my actual user class. Great, here. Here's my user class. And we're going to build out this static method. So what we're going to do, and again, this is just a capability of the class. Now at the class level is what we're wanting to make sure, right? Before we can create an instance or even talk to my database, I want to make sure, is my data valid? So I'm going to say at static method. And I'm just going to say def validate user. Now I'm going to pass this and then we're going to kind of pause and go through it. What this validate user is just a method or a functionality of my class that I can call to first check and say, is my data valid or not? Now notice there's a few things it does. It takes in data. So we need to pass it in some data to check to see if it's valid. Where do you guys think this data is going to come from? Let's pretend we come here and when I select create user, I want to make sure it's valid first. Where do you think this data is going to come from? Or what is it going to be? Yeah, it's going to be from my create. That's exactly right. And this data is going to be whatever's coming from my form, right? I'm wanting to see what the user gave me. Is that valid data? Now here I've got this variable called is valid. Now this could be anything you want. It could be unicorn, cupcake, doesn't matter. But what it's doing is it's saying, okay, is this true? Right? Is it true, meaning that yes, this is valid, or false, meaning that it's going to not be valid? So what we do is we initially set it to true, right? We think, okay, our user has good intentions. We're going to just assume that it's good to go. And then we start doing our checks. We have a bunch of if statements here. Now, can anybody tell me why we have ifs and not if elif? Why wouldn't I have like elif else?
Because you have multiple things that needs to be verified.
That's exactly right, Estrella. If I had it as just one chain, like if elif else, then let's say that this one is not true. It's going to enter in and then remember it stops running, the rest of my conditional statement. But just like Estrella said, we want to make sure every single piece, we want to see what, every single thing that's not valid, we want to be able to see that. So that's why we have a bunch of ifs. And so what we're saying is, hey, if the length, and usually what we're saying is it empty? If we say length is less than 2, what that means is that they just put a single letter or it's empty, right? So we're saying it's got to be at least 2 characters. If the length of the data of key form or first name, sorry, is less than 2, then I want to say that this is false. Now, this is really important. If any of these are true, that means our data is no longer valid, right? Is valid is now false. Hey, they gave us a piece of information that's not okay with us. It's not good. So we check this one and let's say that it is true or it's false, right? Let's say that it is greater than 2. So then we say, okay, it's not false. Is valid is still true. We come check here. Is last name less than 2? It's not. Let's pretend that it's 3 or 4. Okay, great. If email is less than 5, we're going to kind of put a pin in this one because we're going to do something different with email. And then password. Now this is a big one, right? Where password, you usually or have dealt with this where it has to be 8 characters or more, right? So we're saying, hey, your password has to be 8 characters or more. If any of these things are true, meaning that my first name is less than 2 characters, my last name is less than 2 characters, my email is less than 5 characters, or my email or my password, sorry, is less than 8 characters, then it's going to return false. Or so, sorry, it's going to change. It's valid to false, and then we are going to return that value. So that's what this method is doing, right? It's taking in some data. It's starting everything out as true. Like, okay, I think we're good. It's going to check each piece. And if any single one of those pieces is not true or it's bad data, then it's going to say, okay, now this is false. And then we just return the result. Either it's true or false. Either it's good data or it's bad data. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. And so we can see that here, right? Where we've got burger, name, bun. We're going to talk about where we're getting this from here in a second. we'll kind of talk about that. Cool. I'm not going to hit flash messages yet. We'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. So where are we going to actually, where are we actually going to call this, method, right? We created our method, but remember it's never ran until we call it. So we're going to go into my controller, and Kevin was exactly right. In my create user, here's where we have this data, right? Here's where we have this data.
Yes.
Now, what I can do is there's kind of two ways you can do this, honestly. I could say, and this is what the platform's going to say, if not, I'm going to say user, validate user, request.form, return redirect user. Now let's kind of talk about what that means. When we just run this, user, validate user, this is us running a method. And a method becomes the value of what it returns, right? So this is saying, hey, in my user class, there's a method called validate user that needs or takes in some information. In this case, we want to pass in our form. And so what it does is it comes here and it gives the request.form. And so here, that's what data represents. And so we're assuming that this is, you can sort of think about data in this case as being like, request dot form is data. So when I say, data of first name, I'm kind of saying request dot form of first name. Does that make sense? Request dot form is really just an object or just a dictionary, but they're sort of the same thing. I'm just rewording it. And what this is assuming is that we have an input named first name. We have an input named last name. We have an input named email, and we have an input named password. Now, if that was not the case, let's say our input had an F underscore name or L underscore name instead of first name and last name, that's what it was, or user email or user password, something like that. We need to change those accordingly. If we want to pass in just request.form, just like this.
So again, they all have to match.
Yeah, you're getting a theme here. They all should match, just make your life easier. If they didn't, let's say your form had F name, but you wanted to call it first name, then you could do this and put this above like that, right? And then instead of passing in request.form, you just pass in data. Like let's say that it was like F name, you could just pass in data, right? And data is going to be the key of first name, which this should match here. The easier way is just have them all match. Make sure they match, and then you're good to go. But does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Cool. So remember, this is running, and this is either giving me true or false. Right? So this is going to run. And it's going to either give me true or false. So what this does is we're saying, if not, return redirect to user. So if this returns false, what this if not is saying, is this true? And saying if it's not true, then I want to redirect. If not, and then what this if not is looking for true. So if this is true, then we're good, right? If it returns true, then we're good. If it returns false, then we're going to redirect to user. The other way you could say is if user.validate user request.form equals false, return redirect user. This is just kind of a Pythonic way to write it, but they're saying the same thing. So let me write that.
I'm sorry. So if it returns false, then it'll redirect to user. But if it returns true, what does it do?
It skips it, right?
Okay.
So,
It
I
just
could say,
continues like connect, kind of like the next step, right? It just continues if it's true.
yep,
If
yep.
it's
So,
not true, then they have to kind of like redo the whole thing.
yeah. So remember, this is this, or sorry, this is saying the same thing as this. So, hey, if what we get back from this is false, then I want to enter into my if statement and I hit a return. And remember, anytime a method or function hits a return, it's done running, right? And it does whatever the return says. So we're saying, hey, if that's false, meaning that there's an error in my data, I want you to return redirect to user. And then, which should be our form, which is our user form. So if there are errors, return redirect. And just like Ashila said, if it's true, then it doesn't enter into my if statement, right? And it just keeps going. Does that make sense?
But if it's not correct, then some message will pop up and then it'll go back to the form like, hey, enter it again to make sure that it's correct.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the messaging, but yeah, Kevin, that's exactly what our workflow is going to be like. So again, we say, hey, if not, user validate data. So if it gives us back false, we're going to redirect. If it gives us back true, then we know our data is good, right? We know, okay, we have good data. We can move forward. We're confident and we could actually ping our database and save some values. So just like normal, we say, hey, if it's okay, then we're good to go. We create data. We use our create user. So we go and actually create it. We put their ID in session, and then we return redirect back to my dashboard. Now, I'm going to get to this piece in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about emails. So I said, just so that way we can kind of get this all good to go. Email, we're going to do something a little bit different. We want it more than 5 characters because, you know, somebody could just put potato in there and then all of a sudden it's going to work, right? It passes our validation. But what we really want is we want there to be, we want to say, hey, we want a valid email address. Valid being subject to like, you know, not that this is an email address that somebody has, but it's got to have certain things where it's got to, you know, some value, an @ symbol, some value, .com, .net, .co, .info, .online, you know, something like that. There's certain patterns to what my string needs to look like. It needs to have an @ symbol, it needs to have a .com or .co or something, but it has to have, you know, something. And so that's where something called regex comes in. Now, regex stands for regular expression. You do not have to memorize or know how to do this. You can go to ChatGPT and you can say, can you create a regex for my email address? Or can you create a regex for my password that needs to have a lowercase, an uppercase, and a number? You can do that. So don't like worry yourself about understanding regex, but here's what it looks like. What we're going to do to create it, and again, this is just us saying, hey, we want to establish that our email needs to follow some pattern, is I need to first import RE. I don't have to download anything. I just import it. That way I can use it. And then I'm going to say email _ regex. Does anybody remember what the capital variable represents in Python? It's all caps. So in JavaScript, we've got a value called const, right? Which is a constant variable. It's immutable, meaning that you can't change it. Python, we don't have that ability. And so what developers will do is put something that shouldn't change. It's not like a variable that varies in value. It should just be a constant. They will put that in all caps. Now, does that mean that I can't change it? No, I can still change it, but it's just a way that we can represent to others, hey, this should be consistent. It should never change. And we just put it in all caps, just like this. Again, that doesn't make it immutable. Python doesn't have that capabilities. This is just what Python developers will do just to make it, you know, kind of across the board. this shouldn't change. Cool. So we say this email regex. We use RE, which is what we imported, .compile, which is a method within this library. And here is actually my pattern. Now, again, this is the part that I'm saying it does not matter if you understand fully what this looks like, but I'm going to walk through it a little bit. Here, you can sort of think, if you've seen emails, which you have, you can kind of see the pattern is here we're establishing that there should be some value that you can use all lowercase a through z, all uppercase a through z, the numbers 0 through 9, and you could have a dot, a plus, an underscore, or a dash, right? These are the special characters that are allowed. And here are the characters and numbers that saying it has to match this pattern, right? If I put in any special character like an exclamation point, that's not in there. You can't see that. That doesn't work. If I didn't have this, that would mean that I couldn't have any capital letters in my email address, or vice versa. If I took this out, no lowercase. If I took this out, that would mean you can't have any numbers in my email address. Just really, it's a way to say, here's what's available and here's what's not. And the computer's going to look and say, okay, so for this first portion, does it fit the pattern? Okay, it does. Great. Then we have our @ symbol.
And one more thing that I might add. Likewise, if you didn't have the plus, the underscore, the minus in there, it would mean you couldn't have any of those characters.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we have our @ symbol. And we're saying, okay, after the @ symbol, same thing, but notice we don't have the plus, right? We can just have a through z, 0 through 9, dot, underscore, dash. Plus, and now this is the last portion, dot, and then here we can't have numbers. It just needs to be, .org, .com, .info. It just has to be letters. So this is really just saying, if you see like, W Calhoun at codingdojo.com, W Calhoun all fits in here at Coding Dojo. Yep. .com. Yep. Okay. That matches my pattern. That's all regex is. You can sort of overkill on regex. Again, you don't need to. There's plenty of regex calculators. You can go to ChatGPT, create a regex password thing if you wanted to do that. We could do that. Not a big deal.
What does that slash stand for in between the plus and the dot?
I believe it's an escape character, but I'm not fully certain.
And what about the dollar sign, the plus and the dollar
I believe
sign?
that's the end that signifies the end. I am not a regex expert, but I believe that signifies, hey, that's the end, whereas this is the beginning. And then the little guys here it's a string. Cool.
You said you're not an expert, but let's say you wanted to add a exclamation, then you just add it on like in between the brackets, correct? Or would that change the string?
I would think so. I would think you could be able to do that. But I don't, again, you could Google email regex that allows for exclamation point in first segment. Let's try. Let's see if this gets me anything. So yeah, here, this is from Gemini, but it doesn't have any lowercase letters. But yes, you're right. You could just put that in there, and then here's some special characters you can have.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Cool. Now we've established this in my model, right? And you do need to have this per, for both. If you're going to have, let's say you have two models that have an email, wouldn't normally happen, but let's say you had a customer and a client, something like that. Then you could do that. But we're going to go down to my validator. And so in the place of this email portion, because again, 5 characters doesn't do anything for us. We want to make sure that it's an actual email type. What I can do is I can say, if not, email regex match data email invalid is false. So it's the same thing as this if not, right? So it's going to run this dot match, and that is going to pass in the email from our request.form. And it's going to match it to this regex pattern here. This one. It's going to run it through that. And it's either going to give me true, meaning, hey, we're good. It matches the pattern. It fits the pattern. It does what it's allowed to do. Or it's going to give me a false. And if it's false, meaning like, hey, they put right now we don't have an exclamation point, but maybe they put an exclamation point there, question mark or something of that nature. And so if it's false, it enters in and makes is valid false. But if it's true, again, it just skips it just like it did here. So again, if this comes back as false, then it's going to jump in. Make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Now, Kevin's exactly right. We want to be able to create a user. So what I want to do is I'm going to print is valid. Okay. Just so we can see it, I refresh. We're good to go. And let's say I just put W, C, or D, create user. Okay, takes us back here, and you can see that I have is valid is false. Right? Uh-oh, I accidentally messed up, but that's okay. Oh no, we're good. I forgot that I thought for some reason we didn't have our redirect, and I thought I accidentally just created a bad user. But we didn't, we're good. And then what's nice about it is we can go to our MySQL workbench. Let me pull this open. And we can see if I'm just getting all my users. Now I don't have that user that I just tried to create, right? It prevented that from hitting our database. What's important about that is anytime we hit our database, oftentimes that is what costs us money, right? The more pings you have to your database, the more it's going to cost you. Either you have some sort of subscription to as like a pay as you go. And so the more you ping it, the more you pay, or you maybe have some like, 1,000 a month and anything over is 5 cents or whatever. 5 cents would be a lot, but so this prevents that from happening, right? So our data has to be good before we're even going to get charged anything for our database. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Now, the second thing we can do is just like Kevin said, it's not super helpful. It's not super helpful when, when I do this, let's say I just try to submit something. Okay, is valid is false, but it doesn't tell me what's wrong, right? What if I just said this? I know that this is good, right? This is above 2 characters. Invalid is false, but that doesn't tell me anything. And so what we can do is we can use something called flash messaging. And flash messaging is a way that from the back end, now there is other types of messaging that you can do when you are like there is other types of messaging that we can do. So that way we can like on the front end do that. But we can use flash messaging. This is again from the back end to communicate where the error is or what issues we're going to have. So what I do is I'm going to go into my user. I am in my model, and I'm going to say from. Now it doesn't really matter what order these are. I just like to keep all of my froms at the top and then imports. I don't know. It's just kind of OCD. But I'm going to say from Flask, which we already have downloaded, import Flash. Cool. Now what we can do is we can say, not only do we want to change is valid to false, but I want to create a flash message that says first name must be at least 2 characters. I can create a flash message for last name, invalid email address. Oops. Cool. And now password. So I say this keyword flash, and then I put my custom message. Now I create this. It can be anything you want to say. But this creates a new message, right? It creates a new message. Now, how do we show those? Well, what we can do is we've taken it in our, so if you're saying flash messages, so there's strings that exist. And what's nice about this is these messages only exist for one redirect cycle. So if you remember, whenever we get redirected, we lose all of our data, but messages actually lives for one redirect. So if they, get redirected and then immediately refresh, they go away. Now you could put it, I guess, in session, but that wouldn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But what we can do is in my HTML, I can actually go and get those values. So let's go do that. So in my user form, which is my user form here, we're gonna do it one way and then we're gonna make it better. So if you're like, oh, I hate this already, it's okay. I'm with you. So I'm gonna say dot card maybe. I'm gonna say errors. Okay. So I'm going to first say %, and double $sign. I'm gonna say with messages equals get flashed messages, right? Okay. Okay. Now, what this is doing is I'm saying, hey, I want to get flash messages, which is declaring a variable of messages on my front end, right? So on my front end, I say with, and then I say messages. So that's me declaring a variable. And its value is the flash messages that I have. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. That's okay. But we say, hey, if there is messages, if those messages exist, then I'm creating a div that has a class of alert and alert danger. So that's, again, just built in for Bootstrap. And then I'm iterating through those messages. So I'm saying for message in messages. And I want to show the message. Now this message is what we created here. Right. And so this flash is just a, when we say get values or get flash messages, this is just creating a dictionary of messages. If that's the case, it creates that. We run it and say, hey, I want to get all those. If there are any, then I want to show them. And that's it. So let's see. We're still running. We refresh. Here it says errors. So I put that. I'm going to actually get rid of that. That's kind of bad. Kind of dumb looking. Fresh. Okay. Now, if I say create user, you can see that we get first name must be at least 2 characters. Last name must be at least 2 characters. Invalid address. Password must be at least 8 characters. So maybe what I would do is I would say something like UL, an unordered list. And then I would say something like this instead. Just to make it look a little bit nicer. To where I just have an unordered list around it, and then I'm iterating through, and for each one, I'm making a list item. That'd be just a really quick, easy way to make this look a lot nicer. Just where I refresh. And I do this. Yeah, so we can get first name must be at least 2 characters. Last name must be at least 2 characters. Invalid email address, password must be. Now, if I say password, we know that's 8 characters, and I say create user, you notice that that is no longer there, right? The error message, because we didn't have an error there. Right? We're still getting that it's
Yes, I
false,
see it.
but it didn't hit this because that wasn't true, right? Or that was not true. It was 8 characters, so it wasn't less than 8 characters, so it's not going to create that flash message.
Hey, Will,
Yeah.
one question really quick. Where did you import the Flash?
At the top of my model, I say from Flask import Flash.
Oh, okay. And so do you have to do the pip env install Flash or anything
It was
like that?
built in. Nope, because you remember when we were saying from Flask. Flask is what we imported at the beginning, and so it's just a value, or it's just a tool in Flask that allows us
Okay.
to do this.
All right.
Yeah, great questions though. But yeah, it's already built in. Whenever we import Flask, it is part of the package.
Okay.
So now we have full on validations with messages and error messages that we can create custom. Now, the last thing, I guess I'll pause there. Are there any questions on what we've done? It's kind of that's the meat and potatoes of what we've done. So we're just going to show you one other cool thing, but this is really all we have today.
Yeah, I have a question, Will. Just
Mhm.
like what Kevin said about like from Flask import Flash. So is it gonna change when you come to the password, maybe like bcrypt?
Yeah,
Or
we'll end up doing that. Yeah, we'll end up using bcrypt. We'll still have this.
okay.
We'll have another one. Like for instance, let's say that, and I guess I'll just show you this because we're kind of ahead. What we're going to end up having is have something like this, where we've got a confirm password. And so what we can do is bcrypt we'll get to next week. But if we have a confirmed password, I don't need to save that in my database, right? Because why would I want to if it's good? Why would I want to take up data and take up size by saving the same thing twice, right? If password is if they're the same, then I just need to say password. That's good. But what I can also do is I can create this confirm password that now allows me to check that. And then what's even nice about it is I'm going to make this 6. What's nice about it is I can now add that to my validation, right? I want to make sure that these match. I don't need to do anything when it comes to like storing in the database. I don't need to do any of that because I'm not going to store it, right? All I want to do is a quick check on does this match this, right? And so what's nice is I can do that in my validator. I can say if password does not match confirm password, I just flash passwords do not match. This is all I have to do for confirm password. Given, the only thing I'll say is given that we're going to pass in request.form. If you were going to not pass in request.form and you were going to do data here, then you would need to take that value from the request.form, put confirm password and pass that in. But doing it this way is just fine. Just make sure that, again, these names, name, match these names. And so now we could see if I do this, see, oh, why didn't that work? Maybe I have to refresh. Oh, you know, it's funny. They do match because they're both empty. So technically they are the same. But if I put, now we get passwords do not match. That's funny. Okay. Any questions on that? On validations?
Not at the moment.
Cool. Now, the last thing that we can do, it's kind of next level. So I hope you guys are ready to take it up a notch. Just kidding. Is if you notice, they're kind of all up here, but it might make sense or it might be nice if they're above the actual value or below. I would say above the actual value that we're having this issue or the one that doesn't match. And so what we can do is flash messages. If we look at the documentation here, you can do flash messages with categories. With categories. And so all I have to do is in this part, when I do flash, I put in my message, which is a string. I do a comma, and then I put in my category, which in this case would be first name. Category is last name. Category is email. Category is password. And then we'll say category here is confirm password is what we'll say. Yeah, perfect. So now there's a key value pair or there's a category associated to my flash message. So you might ask yourself, well, what are we going to do with that? Great question. Glad you asked. Instead of doing my errors up here, if we look at my documentation, what I can do is I can say something like this. I'm going to comment this out. Okay. What I want to say is I'm going to do my curly bracket, and this is just coming from the documentation right here. I'm going to do my % sign. I'm going to say with errors equals get flashed messages. And then I'm going to say the category filter. Category filter. I'm above first name. So I'm going to say it is equal to, oops, it's equal to first name. So what I'm saying here is, hey, I want to, oops, sorry. I just want to get the errors that have the category of first name. Right? Then I'm going to say, oops. Sorry, this little screen's kind of killing me. Then I'm going to say if errors. And then I can decide whatever I want to do for error and errors. And now, because we commented this out, if I were to go back, my thing's still running, it's saved, I refresh. Oh, I need my end with and my end if. Uy, jole. End if.
You speak Spanish?
No, my wife does though.
Oh, okay.
Well, I grew up in New Mexico, so I speak un poquito. Not a lot
Oh,
though.
cool.
But yeah, my wife lived in Guatemala for a very long time.
No way. That's where I'm
Yeah.
from.
No way. What part?
Yeah, the capital. But I was brought here to the States, you know, family issues.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
She lived in Antigua.
Oh, nice. It's beautiful over there. Have you been?
Yeah. I've not
Okay.
been. I've not
Oh,
been.
you need
That's on
to.
my
It's
list. Yeah.
beautiful.
It's on my list.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry about
cool.
that.
My bad.
No, you're fine. No, never apologize. Okay, so sorry, I had to end my if statement. Which is right there, and then end my with statement there. Sorry about that. Okay, but now what's nice is you can see that I get this first name must be at least 2 characters. Right? And so that's above my first name. Now, if I were to kind of do the same thing, But let's take this value right here. I'm gonna change this to last name.
Oh, wow,
Perfect.
so it would have to be done for every value.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
If we're
wow.
gonna do it
That
now, again, this is
sucks.
back end. I know this is back
Okay.
end, usually on the front end. I have an error somewhere and I need to fix it. It's driving me crazy. Oh. Does anybody see my error? See if you guys can figure it out. We'll debug since this is basically all we have for class. But what I'm looking at right here is I'm like, okay, wait. I got this whole square that didn't happen last time. That's
Did
red.
you have an extra div?
I don't have an extra div. I have an unclosed div.
Hmm.
This was not closed. And so
Ah,
the whole thing, and then notice this was another div. And if I would have done that, it would just kept going and going and going and going and going. So now if I refresh and I create user, I did not close this one either. Because I copied and pasted. Oops. Heck. Refresh one more time. Okay. There we go. So now we see that we can have this and this card maybe is excessive. Where we don't need to have like red card each time and alert, danger alert, roll alert. I think that's what's making this red and kind of bigger. So you don't have to have that. You could just say for error and errors. If I were to comment this out.
I think we all agree that we'll just do it on the top.
Yeah, either one works. Either one works. So you could just do something like that. Yep, either one works. Does not matter. But yeah, you would just go through each one. Grab this. I'll just do it for each one, just so that way you guys can see.
Where does the get underscore flashed messages, what's that for? Where does that come from? I mean, is that it's something, is it like something, some kind of written set of characters that you always have to have? Or?
Yep. So if we were to look here, and we have the documentation, which is what we were going off of, right? And we're talking about inside the template, then you can tell the get flash messages function. So if we want to return the categories, then we can do it like this. Right? So or you can look at flashing with categories. So if we had just like simple stuff, we still need to get our flash messages. Right? We still need to grab those values because it's created. We just need to go get them. And then we can say, hey, if there are any messages, then I want to iterate through and message. Now we made it a little bit more complicated. That was kind of the next level. So we started out with the first thing, right, where we just got the messages and iterated through if there were any. And then if we wanted to have it, and the point was trying to show that we can do, you can do this, where we can have it for each one. So if we wanted to do it this way, then we were showing that, hey, we can do this with categories and then put a new category for each flash message by having the message and then its category there. And then we filtered it out by saying, hey, we only want this one. So that was a way that we could get, okay, if we just wanted first name, then just get me the if there is one, and give me the one with first name. But if I were to say Will and try this, we could see that, nope, doesn't have first name, doesn't do anything, still invalid, but it only is for the ones that there's an issue. But why is that the case? These two should not be the same.
Doesn't say that it has to match.
Yeah, it should say passwords do not match. This is confirm password. And this is confirm password and confirm password. It's very odd. Because the code is correct. Let's try this. Let's see if it's weird. Oh. I don't know why this is showing twice. But I remember this shouldn't show twice. So that's unique.
Is it because of the flash message that you put by category? Oh, look, it fixed.
But it's still adding this one. That's why I'm confused. Did I? No, it's above this, right? This is it.
Scroll up a little bit. It's because it's your screen.
I know.
You have the password twice, I believe. You have it on the top and on the bottom. Right?
Email, password, confirm password. I end it. We have this foreign group. Then I get flash messages with a category filter of confirm password. If errors. So this should just go in and only get the ones that have confirm password, which is this. It should not be showing both of these. See, this is all of the ones. So this is why it's odd. It's not like we're saving it twice. Right? Or else we would have seen it twice up here. This shouldn't be there. Now I'm super stumped.
You got us looking.
So I'm wondering if it's not smart enough to filter. Is it's not just taking this string, it's just applying all of the words and it's saying if password is in any of these, then that's what we send it. That's what I'm thinking is happening. So if I say PW, it changes it, right? So let's try. I think this is gonna fix it. Yeah. So what I'm assuming is happening
The same words, yeah.
is under the hood when we're saying category filter, it's just saying, hey, if any of this filter matches because it was password and password, you're saying, oh, I've got one that has password and I've got one that has confirmed password. And so it's bringing both back because password was technically in there, which is weird because you would think that that would mean that this one would also do the same, but it looks like under the hood that something was weird with this category filter. So by changing it to confirm PW, that fixed our problem. But okay. That is all I have for validations. Are there any questions on what we did?
So for next week, where we do the login and the registration,
Mhm.
isn't the password part of that? It seems to me that when you covered the password, it was kind of like getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because our that's assignment that's due this week we don't do a password for that. So like, is
No.
it
No, next week we're going to be doing bcrypt, so it's not ahead per se.
okay?
Yeah, no, next week we'll be doing bcrypt, which is a more
Okay.
advanced thing for sure. But I mean, password's just like any sort of value, right? The only thing that we did that maybe is quote unquote advanced is this portion right here, but didn't feel like that was very too big of a jump.
Okay.
Because we're not doing like if we'll be doing bcrypt. So actually technically I could be
Okay.
talking about bcrypt this week, but it's just right here, right? So you guys are doing cookie order with validation, same thing. And then the next one is securing the password. So it's not super advanced. But if that confused anybody, I'm sorry for that.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Cool. Any other questions? Like I said, it's pretty light week. That's really all the stuff that we have to talk about. Next week, we'll talk about bcrypt and logging in and registering, which we kind of already doing right now. We're creating the user. We'll just call that a login, do a couple different things. But other than that, are there any other questions you guys have?
No, just a reminder with the video. That's it.
Yeah, I'll make sure that it's up.
Please.
Yep, of
Thank
course.
you.
Of course.
We appreciate that, Will.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Have a
Well,
good
something-
night, guys.
Take
Thank you.
care.